Mr. Oglesby here. So we are going to be today continuing our look at what you need to know from pre-AP chemistry for AP chemistry. So today we're going to be focused on our polyatomic ions. Now your polyatomic ions are kind of one of those big things that you do need to have memorized for your test. So what is this going to do for me? Well, this is going to be a little memory trick for you, a little way to help you remember your polyatomic ions. I call this trick the Santa hat trick. And the reason I call it that is because we're actually going to draw a little Santa hat on our periodic table, and it's going to help us remember some of those polyatomic ions. Okay. Now the polyatomic ions that we're going to be specifically focused on are the ones that have oxygen in them. Okay. And when you're looking at those on your list, what you'll find is that a lot of them have oxygen attached to the end of them. And so that's what this trick is actually going to be focused on. For this, it doesn't cover all of your polyatomic ions. For example, ammonium or cyanide or ammonia, those are polyatomic ions that you don't necessarily see on this specific trick, but this trick is actually to kind of get you moving along in the right direction with your polyatomic ions, and it does cover the majority of your polyatomic ions. So let's get started on it. If you'll notice, your polyatomic ions, again, have that oxygen attached to the end of them. They also have some other nonmetal that's attached to them. So what do I do with that? Well, this trick, what it does is it takes all those, you draw a Santa hat on your periodic table, and then all of a sudden you know how many oxygens are attached to that nonmetal. What's their charge? All those things are going to be things that you can pull from your periodic table just by drawing this little hat. So let's get started with it. So we start our hat with the little band that goes around the bottom of any Santa hat. We're going to start right here at iodine, and we're going to go all the way up to fluorine. All right, so we've got our little band there. Well, the next part of any Santa hat is the little red part that kind of loops up and over. So we're going to come up, and we're going to come over, and we're going to loop back down kind of like that. Okay, so if you look, it's starting to look a little bit like a Santa hat. So again, your Santa hat kind of looks like this. And then the last little thing is to add that little tassel on the end, right? Well, that is something that we do need to do. We need to add that little tassel on the end. So how do I use this? What's the purpose of what you have done, Mr. Oglesby? Well, this is actually going to be how we can actually tell what each polyatomic ion is. This is specifically going to tell us about our eights. So carbonate, phosphate, chlorate, arsenate, sulfate, all of those things, this is what this is going to focus on, but I can then teach you how to convert from sulfate to sulfite and all those kind of things, okay? So what do I do with this? So with this little chart, with this little Santa hat here, we're going to start with this first column, column 17. Well, column 17, every single one in that column has a -1 charge. Okay, so they've all got a -1 charge. Then we move over to 16. They've got a -2 charge. Then we move over to 15. Now 15, if you'll notice, there's two sections. There's the one part that's in the red and the one part that's in the black. The part in the red has one charge. The part in the black has another. Okay, so the next one would be -3. And then we're going to start coming back down with our charge. So then for the silicon, so group 14 here, we're going to have a -2. And then our nitrogen, in terms of like nitrate, nitrite, those kind of things, they're going to have a charge of -1. Okay, so I start at the fluorine group right here. So it's -1, then -2, then -3, then back to -2, and then finally end at -1 for that nitrate and nitrite. Okay. Well, now, what else do I know? Well, this also tells you how many oxygen you have. So I'm trying to figure out how many oxygen I have. I know that I've got these fluorine, chlorine, bromine, iodine. Then we've got sulfur, selenium, phosphorus, and arsenic. And then arsenic, and then we keep on moving. So what do I do with this? How do I know how many oxygens I have? Well, basically, as long as it's not in these middle four, they have 3 oxygen. Okay, so if I'm talking about either fluorine, chlorine, bromine, iodine, silicon, carbon, or nitrogen, they're all going to have 3 oxygen. Okay, so this 3 oxygen, this 3 oxygen, this 3 oxygen. Okay, well, what about those ones in the middle? Well, those in the middle, those 4 in the middle have 4 oxygen. Okay, so if I've got a phosphorus attached to oxygen, and I know that's a polyatomic ion, then it would be phosphate, which would be PO4. Okay? All right. So let me actually write that. So both of these, this and this, have 4 oxygen. So you're like, okay, Mr. Oglesby, well, now I know that sulfur has 4 oxygen. Well, 4 oxygen for what purpose? Well, so let's actually look at this. So this is, again, if I'm talking about my polyatomic ions that end in 8. So if they tell me I have something like sulfate. So sulfate is SULFATE. You see that, and they're like, okay, well, what is the formula for that? Well, what we actually do is we say, okay, I've got sulfur. Okay, I know it's got sulfur because it's sulfate, right? So I've got sulfur, and I know it ends in 8, so that's going to tell me it's a polyatomic ion. So SO something, okay? Well, now I come back down to my Santa hat. Well, sulfur is in that second column, right? Well, since it's in that second column, that tells me that it's going to have a -2 charge. Well, now I need to figure out how many oxygen it has. Well, since it is in that group of 4 in the middle, it's going to have 4 oxygen. Okay? All right. Now, let's try something else. So let's say I've got silicate. S-I-L. I am unsure why it did that. Sorry about that. S-I-L-I-C-A-T-E. So silicate. Okay? Silicate. It's going to have silicon, Si, attached to an oxygen. Okay? Now I need to look and see where it falls on my little Santa hat. So first off, it does come up here to the group 14. So everything in that group 14 has a -2 charge. Well, now I need to know how many oxygen I have. Well, I look back. Is it in that group of 4 in the middle? No, it's not. If it's not in that group of 4, it has 3 oxygen. So I want y'all to do phosphate, P-H-O-S-P-H-A-T-E, and I want y'all to go ahead and pause this video real quick and do your phosphate. So pause the video. Okay, well, y'all should have paused the video, so let's actually go over what phosphate is. So phosphate is a phosphorus attached to oxygen. It is in that group 15, specifically in the red part of the Santa hat. So it's got a -3 charge. And it's phosphate. It's in the group of 4 in the center, so it has 4 oxygen. So phosphate would be PO4 with a -3 charge. So now you know all of those that end in 8. So how do I get from 8 to ite, or hypoite, or per-8, or stuff like that? Okay. If you've got something that ends with ite, so ends with ite, what you're going to do is -1 oxygen. Okay? If it starts with hypo, again, -1 oxygen. And I remember that because hypothermia is going to be a low body temperature, so you're going to lower your oxygen count. Okay? And then last, if it starts with per, like perchlorate, we are going to add 1 oxygen. Okay, so let's say if they tell me I have hypochlorite. Okay, hypochlorite. Well, hypochlorite is Cl attached to an O. Well, chlorate is ClO3. How do I know? It's in my Santa hat, but it's not in that middle 4. So it's got ClO3. Okay? ClO3. And then its charge, it's in that first group, so the charge is -1. But this would be for chlorate. I need to look back and see, okay, well, if I start with hypo, what do? Well, if I start with hypo, I subtract 1 oxygen. So I'm going to subtract 1 oxygen. So instead of 3, I'm going to have 2. But that's not it. It also ends with ite. Well, again, if I end with ite, I subtract 1 oxygen. So again, I'm going to subtract 1 oxygen. So hypochlorite is ClO with a -1 charge. Hopefully this has helped y'all with your polyatomic ions. This does go through a good portion of them, so it is a good memory tool for you. If you got any questions, please let us know, and we will get back to you. Thank y'all.